let's do one hurrah for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, it's a good day in Akron, it's a good day in Cleveland, it's a good day all around. And this is a much needed day that we have here today. So I want to thank all of you that have joined us here tonight for our joint meeting. At this meeting, proposals will be brought forward of how we will move forward, how the building of schools will move forward. And I just want to thank all of you. It is a little bit warm in here, and I apologize that there wasn't plenty of seating, but I thank all of you that are here tonight. I also, just side note, those people from the Board of Education or Akron City Council, I do have parking passes for you. So, because we have instituted the new...
We don't need to go into that part right now.
No, well, same thing for that. I just want you to know that I have your back, Mayor Horton, and I have these passes. And I would like to now pass it on to Margaret.
Good evening, Margot Somerville, 3rd Ward Councilperson, Vice President, Akron City Council. I just really would like to thank President Marilyn Keith of Akron City Council and President Bruce Alexander from the Akron School Board and our Superintendent David James for putting together this meeting on this afternoon. And so we had a great crowd and a great audience about a very important topic, which is our students here in the city of Akron. I know that everyone in this room, that's our top priority, our students, our young people in the city of Akron as a whole. So thank you and welcome everyone.
Good evening and welcome. I want to say it is a great day here in Akron, as Keith has stated, and also that it's a great day in Cleveland. But if you realize that this is a tale of two cities, one man who comes from the city of Akron to lead two cities to a position that they're in today, which is a championship. We want to be champions for our schools. We want to be champions for our city. We want to make sure that our students get the best they can, as well as the individuals in the community get the best that they can get as well, because we want our city to be right and we want our city to be champion. I want to thank Patrick Bravo, my vice chair, for doing all this. I've been out for about 6 weeks under doctor's care, and I want to thank him for doing a wonderful job of getting us together. I want to thank the leadership, Dave James, our superintendent, and the mayor, and the organization. Thank you. Thank everyone for being here this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Bravo, and I'm Vice President of the Akron Board of Education. First, I want to just say a big thank you to David Jennings from the Akron-Summit County Public Library and his staff for doing a fantastic job of getting us in here and getting us accommodated as best as we could. So big shout out to all of them. Thank you very much. And I also want to say welcome and thank you to the members of the board and to council, to the staff that's sitting around the table that help make what we do happen every day, and also to Mayor Horgan for being here and to the superintendent. For those of you, just a little housekeeping. If you are standing and you would like to sit, there is overflow seating in the room next to us, and there is audio in there, so you will be able to hear what's going on. The agendas and the documents we did pass around. If you didn't get one, there should be extras in the back of the room. And any of the supporting documentation that we're providing that the council members and the board members have in front of them, and some of that is back there as well. Today's format is an informational meeting, a joint meeting, and you'll notice that we called together separately, but we're here together to discuss the schools, to discuss the students, to talk about where we were, where we are now, and our options for moving forward. But it's informational only. No decisions about any projects that have not been done yet have been made, and none will be made here tonight. There will be no action taken during this meeting, either of City Council or of the school board. So it was really an opportunity, as we near the state's, and as you'll hear the superintendent talk, the state's participation in our building program is coming to a close. We started 15 years ago, and a lot of things have changed, and I know I've said it before, City Council has changed, the school board has changed, the city itself has changed, the A lot of things have changed in the last 15 years, and as we're entering what could be the last phase, at least of the state's participation in this program, it's time to get together and talk about options for moving forward. So that's the format tonight. The only thing that I would ask of our members and would ask is, as we engage each other in this dialogue, is that the school board, and I'd like to credit Reverend Curtis Walker for this, at the school board we have a little saying that, you know, even when we disagree, we agree to disagree, but we're never disagreeable. So if we could keep that in mind and just have keep some decorum, have a good discussion about how we move forward together, that would be much appreciated. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Superintendent of Akron Public Schools, David James, for our presentation.
All right, good evening. Can everyone hear me? All right, thank you. No? Well, one of the technicians gonna fix that. I don't think, I'm not sure this is my thing. All right, what I'm going to do tonight is kind of walk through the history of our project and bring you up to speed in terms of where we are today. And as Board Vice President Rambo said, there are really no decisions that we're making. These are just, this is just a summary of the information that we have to this point, and it'll take the joint work of the city and the council and the Board of Education to come together to figure out where we go from here. Back in 2003, we had in 2002 and 2003, we were first introduced to the state program where they would provide matching funds if we could come up with a local share for a project that was estimated to be approximately $773 million. So the administration at that time worked with the school board, put issue 10 on the ballot, which increased the city's income tax 0.25%. And then the city, of course, sold bonds, which came up with our local match of the facility program. The project status to date is we've completed 29 buildings. 2 buildings are under construction. It's the combination of Firestone and Litchfield and Harris COC. And 2 buildings are in design, approaching construction. I think we've started some early site work at Ellett and Case. The remaining buildings in the program so far are Garfield, Kenmore, Miller South, Bettis, Firestone Park, Piper, North High School, and Kent Middle School. Now, the original scope of this project was 58 buildings, and we closed buildings soon after we started the project, and right now we're estimated to be at 41 buildings when we're complete. So here is a summary of the original master plan from 2002 that was created by the state of Ohio working in partnership with the city of Akron and Akron Public Schools. The total project, $774 million. The amount that the state would provide at the time in co-fund, $409,284 million, in our what's called our local co-fund. That's our local share that goes along with the state match. And then another important aspect of this is what we're called locally funded initiative. These are things where, because of the Ohio Revised Code, which allowed the city to give money to the schools for new construction, that section of the Ohio Revised Code required them to be called community learning centers. And so there were some things that we felt at the time were important for community learning centers, such as community kitchens. In some of the buildings, we expanded gym space. And then for our educational needs with a larger special education population, also created smaller rooms where we work with smaller groups of students with our intervention specialists. Now, after we started the project and signed off on the master plan, this chart shows where our enrollment has gone. The blue line represents our historical enrollment. So back in 2002 with the original master plan, we were at about 30,000 students. And today we're a little under 21,000 students. Now at the same time, during the project, the state of Ohio would come in and they would do enrollment projections. And so the enrollment projections would look out from 5 to 7 years and tell us what that future enrollment would be, and that was what we call the design enrollment. That's what the state would co-fund. So the numbers that you see on the red line actually represent for that year the future estimated enrollment that the district would have, that the state would partner with us in. So the initial projection that the state gave us was 30,511 students when we were done with the project. And as you see in subsequent years, as the state has done those future enrollments, we're now down to what they're saying our future enrollment should be around 19,000 students, and that's what they're going to fund. They are not going to fund where we are today, which is the 20,990. And that 19,126 students at the end of the graph is in the year, approximately school year 2020, 2021. Again, they look forward in terms of the enrollment projections. In terms of construction dollars per square foot, when we first started the program, we were at approximately $160 a square foot. And over time, our construction dollar amount per square foot has gone up. Today, it's at $243 per square foot. In the chart, I listed underneath the dollar amounts the buildings that were built during that segment. So you can see in segment 1, which was our largest segment, from Helen Arnold down to Boris. In segment 2 at $180 per square foot from Barber to Reimer. From Bochtel to Cyberling, $207 per square foot in segment 3, which started in 2007. And then segment 4 in 2010, the Firestone and Harris COC projects and Case and Elliott are currently estimated at $243 per square foot. In terms of our overall estimated project cost summary, these are done by the commission for each segment we enter into. So in 2002, you can see the breakdown, as I mentioned before, the numbers which represent the red is the state co-fund, the yellow is our local share of that co-fund, and then the beige color is the locally funded initiatives. And so those amounts fluctuate as we go through the project based on what the state understands our scope to be. Currently, our estimate is that the state will be about $339 million. Our local co-funded share, $236 million, and our LFI at approximately $133 million, excuse me. So from the 2002 master plan to our estimate of where we are in 2016, going from a $774 million project down to $708 million. And I'll explain some of the why with our next slide. So in 2014, the state came in and did another enrollment projection and looked at our scope. So in 2014, they estimated that at the completion of our project, we would be at 19,452 students. In segments 1 through 4, these are projects that had already been completed or near completion. We've already built, in terms of the size of buildings that the state participated in, 16,921 students. So we have to subtract that from the balance. So from 2014, and based on segments 1 through 4, we're left with 167 elementary kids that the state will fund, 28 middle school kids, grades 6 through 8, 1,796 high school kids in 9 through 12, and 540 students in career tech programs, for a total of 2,531 students. When we looked at segment 5 with Case Elementary School, We took those 167 students and applied them to the CASE project, which means we have to fund the additional students, because CASE, I think their population in design is about 400 students. We also took 900 students for ELIT, regular 9 through 12, and 210 students for ELIT for the career technical programs, for a total of 1,110 students. So the total number of students we deducted, so the total number of students that we deducted for segment 5 is 1,277, which leaves us with 1,254 students that the state is saying they will partner with us on in terms of funding. There are two things we have to understand here. That doesn't mean, we can't do other things with our buildings. It just means the state's going to provide a co-fund for that 1,254 students. And if you notice, there are no elementary students left. These are all secondary students. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ryan Pendleton, who will talk more about the finances that are related to our building project.
Thanks, Superintendent James. What this slide is going to bridge the gap between the construction summary and our operations. So as you see in red, this is a historical enrollment. This is unfortunately a declining pattern in northeastern Ohio. This decline in enrollment, we've seen anywhere from between about 200 student a year loss as high as 900 student a year loss. The blue line down below represents our student per pupil annual cost, what it costs to educate a student in Akron today. And as you see, prior to the Great Recession in 2008, those costs were increasing. Those correspond to Superintendent James' costs on the per square foot construction costs, and that's going to be relevant in a later slide. And then you see in the white chart up top, just kind of overlaying the number of buildings we have as we're trying to be efficient with these operations. This is a really simple graph to show you where we're at, give you a little historical perspective on operating dollars, and give you a little glimpse on how K-12 schools are funded in Ohio. As you can see, in 2012, Akron Public Schools went through a period of spending more than they were receiving. This happens about every 3 to 5 years, sometimes it's longer, in the 614 districts in the state of Ohio. This is why we have all known to come and love school levies. They're an unfortunate necessity in every community. Some can extend a little while longer based on their property growth. As you remember, and are still reeling from that, is the Great Recession in 2008 and decline in property values. We've had 3 triennial updates, 3 reappraisals that have had significant decline in property values. And that's 70% of our revenue. So 2012, you see the red line is our total operational expenses. Our green is our total revenue. We're spending more than we receive, so what do? You trim expenses and you raise revenue, of which you did both. You passed a levy in 2012, it starts to collect, and then you go through this cyclical nature of school finance where you build your cash reserves, unfortunately planning for the next time when your expenses start to eclipse your revenue. You see that star represents where we're at today. We're predicted to deficit spend in our budget next year of about $4.8 million. That's not uncommon. I think we'll be able to work with all of our staff and school board to trim some of that 4.8. But long term, and this is really the meat of the 5-year forecast, is what drives the chart before. If I could have you look at the yellow line, if you don't look at any other number on this sheet. I love to sit behind my spreadsheets, but that's probably where I would direct you most, is you see in fiscal 2016 in the yellow line, we have a revenue surplus of $11 million. And I mentioned at the last slide, we have a deficit of $4.8 million. Fast forward to fiscal 2020, we're deficit spending to the tune of $18 million. Again, it's not uncommon. It doesn't mean mismanagement. It means we're very efficient. We're very efficient in our operations as you saw those per pupil expenses. And we'll go to the next slide, which kind of sums it all up before we turn it back over. In fiscal 2020, in the bottom right-hand corner, you see that we end with a predicted cash balance of $1 million. Akron Public Schools payroll in 1 month is about $12 million, to give you perspective. So if we don't address our footprint, I think if we say as a community and school board, we want to operate a larger footprint, then it's going to come at the expense of cutting other expenses or raising future revenue. The last chart I'll share with you is a lot of the components that we've seen right up to this point. The red bar graph is our enrollment in 2007, or I'm sorry, the red is our capacity. I apologize. The red capacity in our buildings had availability for 42,000 students with our in-seat enrollment of 26,000. I'll let you kind of digest that graph. At the bottom of the chart are the buildings that we've closed along the way. And then the yellow line is our per pupil cost, which we've been able to maintain at a stable level. Fast forward to 2015, we have an in-seat enrollment, the Superintendent James mentioned, of just under 21,000 students that we educate. We have a current capacity of 30,000. If we were to look at our fellow districts just south of us, there are 3 in particular, one of which I may have come from. If you took those 3 districts, they would fit into the external and internal capacity that we have now, to give you a perspective. Again, we're the 4th largest student enrollment district in the state of Ohio. So our capacity is much larger scale. And I really do want to credit both the city and schools for shrinking that capacity and becoming more efficient, because ultimately what you're doing is you're extending the time in which you need to come back to the public for new tax money.
All right, so in summary, when we look at our city population in 2002 versus 2016, there's been a decrease. The number of schools that were projected to construct from 58 down to 41. Our projected enrollment is lower. The cost per student has increased but has stabilized. The overall budget that we have available from 2002 to 2016 has decreased. The state share for the project has decreased. And the construction costs on a per square footage basis, which establishes budgets for these projects, has increased. So my charge with the board is looking at that is to come up with options on where do we spend the potential state match moving forward. And so now I'm going to warn everyone, do not think that this is like where we're going. I don't know that because I don't make the decision. These people around the table do. But these are kind of some things that we're putting on the board to show you what could potentially happen. Doesn't mean it will. So in option 1, basically we open Firestone, Litchfield in the fall, so that would be 6 through 12 high school. Ellet will be starting construction, and basically that's a 9 through 12 school in the orange, you know, on this side. Those 2 would pretty much remain the same. So in looking at, the problem is I have, in terms of high schools, I have North, Garfield, and Kenmore. So 1,250 or so students could support one high school, and there are 3. So this is trying to get those reduced. So in terms of what we could do with Bucktoe and Kenmore, potentially Kenmore could be merged into Bucktoe. Bucktoe could then become a 9 through 12 building. Bucktoe has some excess capacity already. And then Ennis could become the middle school for that cluster in the light blue. In the center part of town with North, East, and Garfield, Garfield could be built new. Our plans are for North, we're working with the staff at North to convert it into a biomedical academy. We could potentially move that academy into Jennings and then make East a large middle school, which could serve Jennings, the former Goodyear Middle School, and potentially Kent Middle School, but keeping the high school career technical programs at the East COC building. There is one potential problem here is with all those middle school students, I would probably have to convert an elementary school like Robinson into a 6th grade academy with about 544 students based on the numbers that I reviewed. But again, this isn't like a plan, these are just options. For option number 2, there's the potential on the west side of the district to take Bucktoe and close it and merge it into Firestone, make Bucktoe a 7 and 8 population building, and then convert Ennis Middle School into a new Kenmore. Kenmore has a little under 500 students currently, and almost half of them are open enrolled into Kenmore. But in trying to make Bucktoe into a large middle school, the problem is I would probably have to take a building like Krause or Helen Arnold and make it into a 6th grade academy, because there would not be enough room for that number of middle school students, we think, in keeping the career programs at Bucktoe, like the masonry program for high school students. Pretty much in the central part of, in the purple or magenta, Northeast Garfield, it would be the same as the previous option and option number 1, and Ellet would stay the same. In option 3, it would be similar to option 2 with the Firestone, Bucktoe, and Ennis as the new Kenmore, but what we could do is build a new Garfield, and then take North, close it, and move it into the East building, leaving Jennings as a middle school. But the little finger in the lighter beige versus orange, I would probably have to take that and put it into Garfield, we're thinking. But that's another option that could potentially work, but there would be a lot of movement. In option 4, again, a Bucktoe-Kenmore combination with Ennis serving as the new middle school, building a new Garfield, and the same moving north into the East Community Learning Center, and Jennings maintains itself as a middle school. Firestone and Ellet, pretty much remain the same. And then another option that staff has looked at is a combination of Garfield and Kenmore, and then closing Kent and putting Kent at Ennis because they would fit. Bucktoe would stay pretty much the same, Firestone, Richfield, and then North and East, again, the combination. There will be an issue, though, we think, with the middle school students, that we would have to find another building for them to go into because Jennings would be full pretty much, and we'd have to look at some options for space for the middle school. But again, these are just options. It's going to take a lot more work for us to figure out how they could go. But, the problem is going to be between North, East, and Garfield. In terms of elementaries, I'll address those because I think some of you have seen where I have Helen Arnold closes. So Miller South is another building that technically we wouldn't have funding for. We'd have to find alternate funding or take an existing building and modify it to accept Miller South. And we're thinking it could be a Helen Arnold could potentially do that. It's large enough. Kraus could do that, it would be large enough. But the problem with both of those options is we would still have to build a performing arts auditorium for Miller South. At one point in the past, we looked at the potential for partnering with E.J. Thomas Hall for Miller South. They really need a new building, so there are some other options that we'll have to look at as well for that, or raise the money to actually do that. In terms of Firestone Park, in terms of Bettis and Piper, it looks like we could take Paris, could house Bettis in addition to its own population. Piper, we will have to wait and see where our enrollment goes in Kenmore, because we do have other schools in there that could absorb some of the population. And then at Firestone Park, the problem with Firestone Park is, early on in the project, there was a desire by some in the community to save it because of its historical significance, and we tried to work through that. There's also other factors in our community, such as additional immigrants coming in, and we are almost at capacity at North in terms of our immigrant population, so we might have to find other locations in the city if we get additional students. Firestone Park could be one of those, but there's also capacity in almost every building that surrounds Firestone Park for additional students, and that's really one of the things that we've looked at. In many of the newly constructed buildings that we have, there is currently additional capacity because of our enrollment declines over time. So where we're at in terms of finances with the city of Akron, the local bond capacity, it's our understanding the city has about 25 million that could go to this project. And so far experience with the state, with our local match and LFI, we probably would get another 20 to 25 million from the state. So the amount we think would be left for the 1,254 students is about $50 million, which we think would be really close, but could get us approximately one high school. In terms of a decision-making process and how we need to do this, we need to really review our options and come up with a decision so we can get a project agreement with the state of Ohio so their funding will flow, work with the city to get additional bonds sold, and then hopefully, because a good planning time for projects will be to start the community planning process in January. I know that's a very aggressive timeline, but we'll have a lot of decisions that we'll have to make moving forward.
All right, at this time, we're going to open it up to questions and answers, and those being questions and answers from council members and from board members. We are going to ask that everyone have the opportunity to speak at least once before they speak again. We'll try and, if you can, limit your question or if it's more of a statement, to 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll go from there. Mr. Kamer, I saw your hand first, so please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Bravo. I just want to thank David James, Mayor Horrigan, and obviously Madam President Marilyn Keith for putting this meeting together. I just want to take a few minutes to concentrate on Firestone Park Elementary. The location of the school that is surrounded by the history of that neighborhood, the churches, the community center, the library, and a business district. I know Mr. Horrigan was very adamant when he campaigned, and I like your ideals of the Highland Square model, bringing it to every neighborhood. I just think the future of that school, if it's closed, or even if we cannot save it as a historical landmark, would devastate that community. So real quick, I just brought some maps, and I'm sorry that if some people can't see them, I'll make this 2 or 3 minutes long. But this is a larger scale map of the Bridgestone campus, the Firestone Stadium, Akron Paint and Varnish, the former Firestone campus, and then obviously what I just touched on, where Firestone Park Elementary sits. I just think it's a very viable asset to that community. We are sinking a lot of money into that neighborhood in regards to keeping Bridgestone here. The Akron Racers is spending $1.8 million in expanding their professional softball team. This is obviously a closer model with the business district, library, community center, the churches. So moving forward, I'm just asking the mayor's office and the joint board of review to really consider what we can do to keep Firestone Park in play. I'm not just saying, hey, I'm just concerned about Ward 7 or the Firestone Park area, but the historicalness of it, where the school sits. Now, obviously, I know we have to make some tough decisions, possible closures, but I'm asking, you know, the planning department with the city of Akron, the mayor's office, economic development, the school board, the joint board of review, to really consider where it sits, even if we can consider the historicalness of it, to try to preserve it, or get donors involved. I believe, I'm going to throw their name out there, GPD, the architects, are very involved in this school, and they are passionate about the school. So that might be a revenue a source that we can go after. I believe Bridgestone, they stay here with their 1,000 jobs. That's another source that we can maybe go after. So just moving forward, I'm sure I got other questions, but I just wanted to present that's really important to that community. And obviously Garfield too, but obviously you spoke about Garfield. Garfield is in your options, and I really appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And with that, I just want you to really consider the future of Akron, the taxpayers, the families that are moving in, and whatever I can do. If you say, Mr. Kamer, we only have 377 students at Firestone Park, and that is more students, according to my numbers, than the other elementary CLCs in my cluster, tell me. I'll go door to door. I'll get community meetings involved with the young families moving into the area. Whatever I can do to increase 377 to 450 to 475, 500. That's my job, so whatever I can do. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Elderman.
Yes, Mr. James, I appreciate you considering our conversation about the not leaving the southwest quadrant of the city without a high school. And I thought it was very important for basically 3/4 of South Akron that it covers with Garfield, the Kenmore area, and putting that into play and consideration. I think a lot of people will appreciate that. You know, I think it's important also to keep Buchtel in play as a high school and as opposed to a junior high school. These are just some of my thoughts. Looks like, you know, I don't know where all the money source is going to come from. It seems that all the money is going to be ate up with the new high school, with a new high school. So obviously there's going to need to be a source of money to modify Miller South, where you're going to relocate it. There's still going to be cost involved. But for the most part, some of these options are very good, and obviously some of these options are very adversely affect a lot of the neighborhoods. But one other question I have: back in you know, 03, when we saw the numbers, you know, we were just getting ready to start the program, the building program. We saw those numbers sliding by 1,000, 500, 800, 600 a year. Did we stop and consider that fact at some point? I mean, and say, hey, let's put the brakes on here for a second?
What we did is we looked at buildings where we were seeing declining enrollment. So back then, like the first one, I believe, was Crosby Elementary School. Then we looked at closing those buildings and then feeding that population in other sectors. So for instance, when we did Crosby, some of those students were funneled into Portage Path. I think when we split that boundary in half, you know, to move and keep some of the other surrounding schools that had higher enrollments, to keep them higher. So that we could, you know, the commission has a rule where for your building project, you have to have a 350 minimum enrollment. And so when we put the list of buildings that were closed, many of them, like the Iriana, like Crosby, Heminger, were buildings that had enrollments that had fallen under 350, so they wouldn't have been funded anyway.
Okay, I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Bogan.
First of all, thank you very much for having this meeting. And I thank Mr. Neal and myself for creating the atmosphere so that we could have this. Because the options that you have provided to us are the kinds of discussions that I have been talking about that we need to have with our community. Because these are difficult decisions. We know anytime you talk about closing a building, busing kids, or moving kids around, it's very serious. Now, I noticed that 3 of your options include closing Helen Arnold. Now, I'm troubled by that, but we will have this discussion at the appropriate time. But I like the options that you are providing, and this could be the impetus to start the discussion with various parts of our community to talk about where do we go from here? Because we don't need to overbuild our school district, which is what we were probably going to be doing if we had continued the path we've been going without discussing these tough decisions. Now, I know that, and when I think about Helen Arnold, I know the location. But I think about Miller South, because when Miller South was created, thought about, there was a lot of worry that parents would not send their kids to this school. But what we've learned from history is that parents will send their children to excellence, and that has been an excellent school, as long as there are safety measures involved. And we know that we put safety measures in that school, and it's been extremely successful for this whole region, not just for Akron. So we know that if we put the programming in play, we know that parents will send their kids. So I want us to rethink, repurpose Helen Arnold, not close it. I mean, that was our first school that we opened, and there's a great woman that is named for it, my dear friend, so we will go to the mat on that. But anyway, the high schools, when you started looking at those and thinking about it, because I was really troubled when I saw Elliott High School and all of the career education programs that are going out there. At one time, we had talked about the possibility of having a career ed program centrally located. I know Central Howard doesn't belong to you anymore because I think it was swapped to the University of Akron. Is there any way to incorporate that in this plan? Is there any possible way to do something with that? Or that would have to be another discussion or whatever with the university?
I mean, we're open all to say the university's using, basically around a little more than half of Central Howard for swing space. The education colleges in there, they're going to be moving up, and then the law school will be moving into that space as well. The other problem though, so when you talk about Elliott, the animal program at Elliott had been out there, and some of the other programs, what we have done is, moved our radio station out of the Yacht Staff Development Center. Because that's one program that we were interested in making sure students could participate in that. Currently, they can't because of the location.
Sure.
But if we were going to do another type of career-only high school, we'd have to build it someplace else. So we would then be closing North, Garfield, and Kenmore in order to, have that career tech. And I think it's more successful by having those programs spread throughout the district. We have our great culinary program, Mrs. Skelly at Buckto, our masonry program there. When we look at the, animal care program, all of our schools pretty much have business programs. A lot of the DECA programs where kids are going and winning competitions all across the country. And we have it where kids can move between those schools. So it is a pretty robust.
And that was going to be part of my question to you. Does this plan incorporate transportation of students who don't have their own, which would be an additional expense?
Right, for the grades K through 8, which we are the state minimum, those are the kids that we transport as long as they live more than 2 miles away from their school. So when you looked at the Kenmore Garfield combo option where we would turn Ennis into a new Kent, pretty much the kids at Kent would be transported to the Ennis location.
Now, I like a lot of what I see in terms of at least starting the discussion about merging some of these high schools and looking at what we're doing. I drive by Firestone High School almost every day, at least 3 or 4 times a week. And I know it goes on and on and on and on. And then I saw that we were only building the school, is it for 900 students?
1,700.
I mean, not just, I'm talking about the high school portion.
And high school, right. It's approximately about 1,100 kids.
For the high school?
Yes, for the high school.
And then for the middle
For
school?
the middle school.
It's about how many?
Litchfield's one of our highest populated middle schools. I don't have the
Right.
numbers in front of me, but it's more than 500.
And I know the question keeps coming up, are we talking about kids that live in that district, or are we talking about kids that are taking advantage of the open enrollment process?
Right, we're an open enrollment district, so all of our buildings have kids who participate in open enrollment. So when we look at a building size, we do consider the number of kids who are actually open enrolled.
So we're talking about kids that would have their home school here, but they open enroll and go somewhere else.
Exactly.
Now, are they going somewhere else full-time, or for part of their coursework, or what? How are we doing that?
If they're involved in a career program, they would go usually half a day, either morning or afternoon. But remember, Firestone's our visual and performing arts school and IB, so we have a lot of kids who enter that building for those programs.
So will we
Similar to
count that
Microsoft.
student as a .5, or how will we do that?
Well, when you do career tech, that's a different calculation than the typical. So they will count the half for the career tech program in terms of the facilities that they need serving the number of students that are expected to go to that program.
And the other thing that we've talked about, and you know, this is an open discussion, the reality is that we know that the state has really been about decimating public education, whether we like it or not. That's what the aim has been, I believe, for a number of years. So we have all of these choices, and we have more choices today than we had in 2003 when I was on the school board. So my question to you is, in these numbers, we do plan for X number of students that would probably leave public education and go to the other options.
Exactly.
Okay.
At your placemat, there is a spreadsheet, historical student enrollment changes, and it will tell you from 1990 all the way up through today, our enrollment, the open enrollment that leaves the district, the charter school enrollment, the 3 voucher type programs, and autistic and leadership scholarships, our total options out, and then what our in-seat enrollment is after. And that's been a problem that has plagued our program from day one with the fluctuations from year to year in terms of students and families who choose open enrollment.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Fusco?
Yes, thank you. Just want to thank everyone for coming together, for the leadership in terms of bringing both together. My question, though, is that with regards to these 5 options that we see, you know, obviously we're going to be having more discussion reference to it, but have you taken, I like page 13 because it kind of tells you a good story in terms of the student capacity, student enrollment, and then the cost per pupil. Have you projected what these 5 options may bring with regards to these numbers here, with regards to this graph? I know it probably, it's guesswork, I understand that.
It is.
A lot of guesswork, but it may shed some light on
So if we were building that 1,200, roughly 60 building today, we're at about $242 a square foot in terms of funding from the state that we would co-fund on. And then we would have to look at what our locally funded initiative costs would be for that. For all the other changes where we're moving kids into a newer building from an old building, there will definitely have to be some renovation issues. So for instance, as Mrs. Amobian was talking about, you know, closing of Helen Arnold and converting into a performing arts school, there's dance studio, there's a performance auditorium that will be needed, there's also additional music practice rooms that will be needed, so that would be a cost. In terms of converting Ennis Middle School into a spot for Kent Middle School, very little change because Ennis was built for, if I remember correctly, approximately 750 kids, and we have less than half of that amount in the building today, so they could absorb, you know, the population, and that's really what we're trying to look at, ideas and options where we can take students who are currently in an older building and move them into a newer, more updated facility.
put up the slide. Revenue expenditure.
Good point from Mayor Horgan is the 5-year forecast. This assumes the current path that we're on now. So it does not assume that we've entertained options 1 through 5. To give you some idea, since the decision has already been made on Smith and Lawndale, that's about $1 million annually in cost savings. Those have been built in the forecast. Just to give some idea that options 1 through 5 does give the community and school board future opportunities as you reduce those expenses to maybe address some north-south issues or other facility needs. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. President? Councilwoman Mosley Samuels.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions and maybe just a thought. I'm just sort of wondering what thoughts went into possibly moving kids from Kent all the way to Ennis as opposed to maybe moving them to Higher. Seems like they're in closer proximity to Higher than they are Ennis. First one. Then second, maybe the thought of possibly combining the kids at Robinson with Mason. I know Robinson is struggling a lot over there. It's in my ward. And you have this beautiful school over there with like 256 kids in it, whereas if they're combined with Mason, you almost have a elementary CLC that's at full capacity. And maybe moving those kids, if you have to move the kids from Kent into Robinson, just to almost keep them in their footprint, on their side of town, instead of worrying about transportation issues, because that's my concern. Parents who don't have transportation, kids missing buses. And then we have an issue with non-attendance, and now we have yet again another enrollment issue. Whereas if they miss a bus, they can get on a bus and travel down Arlington and get off and go to school. So those are things that I'm more concerned with, is if we start talking about moving kids from one side of the town all the way to the other, how is that going to affect them attendance-wise?
Yeah, in terms of Higher, that's a building from day one has stayed pretty much at 90% capacity, so there's very little space to expand more students in there. And that's a valid point on Robinson, because that one was built, I think, approximately 500 students. So that is a potential option. We would have to do some renovations, there, because the gym probably wouldn't be appropriate. And then the way we do secondary feeding for middle and high schools is not a warming kitchen, which is what Robinson has. But again, no matter what we do, we would have some of those costs that we would have to try to account for.
Mr. Freeman and then Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. James. We've had some conversations. Has there been any cost estimates go into conversion of Ennis to a Kenmore High School? I mean, I know Kenmore High School right now, Ennis could handle the number of kids that we have right now. I think, if I'm correct, I think the last figures I heard that the number of students from the Kenmore cluster that are actually attending Kenmore High School are like at 300. Has there been any estimates done if there would need to be any conversion at all to convert Ennis into a new Kenmore High School?
Right, no, but we would, if we were going to maintain sports teams there, we would have to do some construction of an additional gym, locker rooms, etc.
Even though there's already 2 gyms there?
Right, exactly. The other issue is, science labs for high school, those requirements. And we might have to look at, if we were going to do that, I would recommend we look at more of a program change, and maybe a new Kenmore High School gets reincarnated more into, a technology and digital school, where we're doing more of the, online and blended learning for that program. But again, those are some things that we'll have to, that we would have to.
And I know that you're aware that Kenmore High School, until we started this project, Kenmore High School is the newest high school in the city. Reconstructed 75% of the building in 1980. Obviously, we're concerned about having a desert over in the southwest corner when it comes to education. And I would, option number 5, the combination of Kenmore and Garfield. I know we had chatted before about
Yes.
some, is that a part of some conversation maybe that we've had just in passing with a totally new location for the combination of the two schools?
Right, we've been taking a look in the community for some locations. I know some have suggested, looking at the location where Margaret Park is. I actually had some previous environmental work sent to me about that. There's some issues with some of the soil there, and also part of the property is on a floodplain, not where Margaret Park was, but to the north of Summit Lake. And then we also had looked at one point, the Akron Baptist Temple property, but I know there's some issues with, we probably have to put pilings in the ground to support part of it, and then there will be a huge amount of demolition costs. We toured the building, and it's just a hodgepodge of buildings that have been put together over the years, so it really couldn't be converted. It would have to be, in a major portion, demolished and rebuilt.
But the Summit Lake site is still in play, though.
Yes, it's just, it doesn't look that promising. We have to have additional borings, and I'm not sure that for 1,260 kids that we would have enough parking once we build it, even if it was a 3-story building. The fields that are to the south of where Margaret Park sits would have to be decommissioned, and then we would probably have to look at, the potential for the road just south of the expressway, the access road that goes over to like where Lake Shore is, or Summit Lake, might have to come out of commission.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you. Appreciate those who organized this meeting. I have a couple questions. What is the cost? What do we receive for each student? The educated student, what's the dollar amount?
So they don't really do it as a per student. What they do is they'll estimate the cost, and then the state will pay 59% of what that construction cost is.
I'm sorry, not for construction costs, just annually. What do we receive per student?
Oh, in terms of regular funding, about Mr. Pendleton, 5,800 bucks
About
per year from the state.
Okay, so if I round that to $6,000, it seems like we're just conceding that these 7,000 students that live in the city of Akron but choose not to go to Akron Public Schools, we're just never going to get them back. That we're just conceding that. If we approached these like they were our students, not Akron Public School students, but they were our students, and just got half of those back, you're bringing another 18, almost $20 million back into the system every year. But it seems like we're just conceding that we lost those students and never coming back. We need to find out, because if they're dissatisfied with the schools, maybe they're dissatisfied with the neighborhoods. We need to find out why our neighbors aren't going to our schools and do our due diligence and make them feel welcome. That's one, because that's money that's just sitting there in the seat cushions and we're not reaching down to get it. The other thing is, I've expressed this before, I know we're going about it the wrong way when we build schools where students go and not where they live. Because the quality of homes and the value of those homes isn't going to change. People move into certain areas because of the quality and the value that they can get into the home, as well as the neighborhood. I remember when we were building Bookto, at that time I think Garfield had had the largest enrollment. That was some 5 or 6 years ago. Now imagine if we built Garfield based on where students were going. Now Garfield's enrollment is smaller than Bookto's. But see, then we also need the school system to help us, because the way you have moved programs around has undermined some of the clusters and taken students with them. So you've created this image that looks like these districts are vibrant, but you've moved the programs. I mean, at Bookto, the Performing Arts program, Tony Award-winning artists have come from there. That was moved from Bookto, taken to Firestone, the students went with it. The Fireman's program was just moved. I mean, there's all these different variables to the leadership in the building, to the staff, to the programs that come into play. And we're looking at, these aren't true numbers, because when you look at the numbers, there was a time, and the numbers are pretty much the same. There were just as many students going into Buchtel's cluster as are transferring out. I think our largest clusters are still Buchtel East, Garfield, and North. But see, then the other thing that's come into play is that you move the boundaries. Buchtel's boundaries have been encroached on more and more. And so, my concern is where people live is not going to change. You put the extra burden on these students to have to catch buses, they have to transfer into communities, and then just being real, when we artificially create circumstances where students have to go to certain areas, we also then lose some students that are in that population. So, as we sit and look at where we are now, and this is why we called the first meeting, because we were like, hey, how can, and this is leading to my next question, how can you build 2 high schools for under 40 million, and then build twice as much to build Firestone? And I've tried to look at the numbers. I don't know if it's an $83 cost difference in construction or $133 difference, but even when I do, what's the square footage of Firestone?
About 380,000 square feet.
Okay, and what are we projecting for Ellet?
Ellet is, I think, around 200,000.
And what's the square footage of East and Buchtel?
Wait.
So what was, sorry, I missed the numbers. Firestone was 380,
383.
383 and,
I think Firestone, Litchfield.
okay, what was the second one, sorry? It was 2 something. No, it was 2 something. Yeah.
Well, but my concern is this, I mean, we get that later. Is that all related to construction costs? I mean, the increase in difference in construction costs? Because when I looked at the numbers, when I was given the numbers that I had asked for, I was told King costs just as much to build as Schumacher. And I'm trying to scratch my head on that one, just by going by and looking at the schools. So
there's a lot that goes into the construction. For instance, at Firestone, there's a pool there. Now, the state won't really fund the construction of a pool and another gym that we have to renovate. Also at Firestone, our performing arts school needed a performing arts auditorium. Our project Lead the Way in engineering programs at Firestone. When you look at Ellet, there is, like I looked at Ellet and Buchtel. So Buchtel, when we did that project, about $1 million in hazardous materials removal. At Ellet, it's twice that much because there's a trace amount of asbestos in the hard plaster that wasn't present at Buchtel. So all of those, you look at the demolition costs, you have to look at the bidding, when we have gone out to bid. Our bids on these projects has fluctuated very, wide. On some projects, we've gotten bids that have come in under the estimate. On other projects, they've been right at the estimate or a little over our estimate. So there are a lot of factors that go into what those final costs are. And I think our treasurer did an analysis of inflation in terms of where those projects, when they were built versus what they would cost today.
Well, just to wrap up my comments. One, again, the concern that brought us to this meeting initially was never to not build Ellet. That was never our concern. It was to build it the right size. Because if you look at the number of students that transfer into that district, I still think we need to look at that, because like I said, something can change with a program that's moved out of a school. Again, I refer to Garfield, was busting at the seams 5-6 years ago before Buchtel was built. And now their enrollment is down. Building it where students go is the wrong way. The other thing is if Akron City Council and Akron Public School Board can put together, if we can put together a marketing plan to pass the levy, we should be able to put together a plan to bring our neighbors, make them feel a greater part of this community and bring them back into the school system. That's one way to increase revenue into the school system. And then lastly, if we can get a clear understanding, again, because for me, and you know the discussions that took place, because they cut corners at Bukto to save money. $11 million doesn't, matter of fact, I went back and looked at the tape. You know, not transferring the students, building a platform, losing different parts of the school that we had to sacrifice, and it was because we knew then that we were running out of money. And then to find out that I could see, based on my numbers, I could see spending as much as $20 million more if it's 133, if I'm doing this right. But to see that you spent more than twice as much. For Akron, as a district, we have to be equitable in where we build our schools, in my opinion. We're not like a Woodbridge or a Copley where we can put all of our money into one school. But to see where, during the process, the things that we wanted, we had to be sacrificed. So that, and we understood so that there could be money to build schools in other districts. But then to see where not 10% more, 20% more, 50% more, but 102 or 3% more was spent in one district, and now you're going to turn around and do it in another one, is hard to swallow. And what I'm saying is with Elliott, since you've already spent $20 million, since Bukto is a 6 through 12, East is a 6 through 12, you've already spent $20 million on their middle schools. It seems like if we were able to spend $40 million and build them a high school, you're freeing up another potentially $20-something million there that can go. And so I just need help in understanding these numbers. Because when I go back to my constituents, they're going to want to know, why did we have to sacrifice all the way through at all of our schools? And we can name the different things. And then we see it looks like it was cut from our budget to put into others.
Give Mr. James an opportunity to respond, and then we have 2 additional requests.
Answer that question.
So we'll get you know, a better understanding of those numbers from Mr. Fletcher, and we're going to have a representative from OFCC come out to Akron and also discuss that.
Yeah, I agree with you on the one point about, I don't think you give up one kid, but the dynamics, I think, of education, if you've spent some time in a classroom, or finance or politics, has changed, and it's almost in the last 5 years where we're almost not even looking. And I think the goal is to build a world-class school district and not necessarily a world-class school building. I don't know what stops a kid from going here just because they live here. And if they can find a program that works for them at Elliott part of the day, North part of the day, and then they go back home part of the day, to me that's the goal. The financial picture doesn't change, no matter how much we want to change the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of us were involved in some of those decisions. Linda, John, myself, Jeff, Mike was on council, and the financial picture does not change. At the end, there's not the money to be able to say this. And whether it's a hard decision and whether it's the politically correct one, we're not here to make those, but there is a financial decision to make. And how do we get as many kids, or not every new kid, into a new building so they can get a quality education with the staff, and then market that and say, look at these things that we can do for them. And it's not necessarily of where you are, it's creating a world-class school district. And that's, to me, that's where all of this goes. So.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have Ms. Walsh, Mr. Kilby, we'll come back, Mr. Kramer.
And I'm just, as probably the newest member to this whole body, but I've been a community citizen all along and watched this project unfold. I think something that Mr. Horgan just said, and people will recognize, I think initially, and I've heard this, that the state said that this community could only support X number of high schools. And we all wanted to keep our communities intact, and we all wanted to work very hard towards it. And as you just said, there's only so much money. We have to do what's right for the city and right for our students. And so let's look at it as Akron. because we can only afford to have so many schools. I've watched this, and it's a can that's been kicked down the road, and we're having to make that tough decision now. That's a decision that could have been made 10 years ago because the state said you can only have so many schools. I don't like it. I mean, everybody likes it. I mean, everybody wants their own school, and I totally understand it. But I think that what we have to do is mirror what Mayor Horgan just said, is that we have to make Akron a great school system and want these people to come back into it. And so we have to pick where we're going to make the best choices, because we're not going to be able to have 7 community high schools anymore. And that's a sad story. It's a sad situation, but unfortunately it's probably a fact of life, and we're going to have to look at it and understand it and make the best decisions going forward.
Mr. Kilby.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Bravo. Mr. James, I was looking at this here chart, I think it's page 5, the built-out projections, and my question is, do we break this down into individual schools in any way, or is it just total enrollment? I mean, do we look at the build-out projections, say, for North High School and Kenmore High School and Garfield High School?
Yeah, I mean, they're all based, you know, we have a gross enrollment that the state says they'll fund, and then it's up to us to figure out where those kids are going to be built for in terms of the different buildings. And so some of our buildings have declined a lot faster in enrollment than others. So our job is to figure out where we're going to place the schools, which is why during the project we closed, you know, in excess of 10 buildings, you know, going through as we looked at enrollment, and some that were too small to even get funding, and to those that just seem to have been taken off, you know, or very precipitous enrollment decline over the years.
So what would you say the build-out projection for North High School will be in 2020 or 21? Do we have those numbers?
No, they're in an enrollment projection that the state has done, which we're going to provide you all links to, so you can see all the data tables for each of those buildings.
Okay. Now, the options, the first 2 options that you guys have, I don't really understand exactly what this means. Like North High School is going to be a biomedical academy, and it's going to be housed at Jennings with 803 students. Is that what?
Yeah, that's one option.
It's in 2 of these options,
right.
1 and 2. So those 803 students that we're projecting, are they from the North neighborhood or from all over the city?
They would, again, as an open enrollment district, some of those are residents of North and some come from other parts of town. Plus, we also have a decent population of multiple handicapped students. North is our cluster unit for those students, so they're transported there every day.
So, so the other students, even if you do option 1 and 2, you keep at North High School, which is biotech, and that's going to be at Jennings.
Yes.
The other students have to go somewhere else?
Yes.
It's not a long way. I mean, it seems like a long way from way up in North Hill to go to East Akron. I mean,
Yes.
Are they going to be provided with transportation, or do they have to get there on their own?
If they are for middle school students, we would be providing their transportation because we provided K-8 high school. We're having some conversations with Metro in terms of how can that work in terms of bus passes for those students. But again, these are not, no one is saying this is what's going to happen.
But even if we did that,
right?
These high school students, you know, there's no bus transportation. I mean, if you're driving, you go right down Brick Road from North Hill. But if not, you go downtown and you transfer at the bus transfer station. And you know, North has 829 students. All right, that's a lot of students. It's got way more than Kenmore or Garfield. And it just seems like it's a long way to go to east from north. It's a lot farther, I think, than going from Kenmore to Bookton.
Mm-hmm.
So what about renovation? I mean, I guess the next question is, like we only had money to build 1 high school. How many could we renovate? It's cheaper to renovate what we have, right?
It depends. I think when we looked at East, that was a renovation and partial new build. in some of the buildings, you know, if it's a OFCC renovation where they're gonna partner, I mean, all the whole structure is gutted to the basic frame and start, so all the electrical, all the piping. So you look at North, you look at Garfield, look at Kenmore, if I'm not mistaken, those are all high-pressure steam buildings, so they would get converted to low-pressure steam as we use package. So everything would have to be, you know, pulled out, abated and everything. So it is, and when we did Ennis, we ran into some unknown conditions there, so that's the one issue with renovation, but it is possible.
Okay, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I guess we all want to be fair, and I get the feeling, I don't know, that the reason Kenmore and Garfield are being drained to high school students is Coventry has open enrollment. Is that
correct?
How many students would you say we have from those two high schools?
I think for Kenmore alone, I think it's in excess, I was in a meeting with Rusty about a month ago. I think there's an excess of 600 students that are actually open enrolling from Akron.
It's over 600.
Coventry, right.
Okay, so Cuyahoga Falls has open enrollment too, right? Correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so do we have any, how many students from the North cluster, high school students are going to Cuyahoga Falls?
250. There was I know another request from one, I mean, maybe Councilman Neal has that information where we did the matrix for every high school going back 5 years, and you can see where the kids are going and coming.
So I'm just thinking, like if we say we're not going to have a North High School, they got to go all the way to East. I think a lot of those parents are just going to say, well, it'd be a lot easier just for them to catch a bus up to Cuyahoga Falls and get into open.
Yeah, but they will have it. North will move to Jennings. You know what I mean? That's one of the options to be able to do that.
Biotech school, I mean, but we're not going to have a North High School for kids that aren't in that program, correct, in any of these options. So, unless they all enroll in the biotech, and, you know, not everybody can get into it, I imagine, but I just think it's going to cause more students to leave, and they're going to go, hey, it's easier for us to go to Cuyahoga Falls and go all the way to East Akron on a metro, and naturally want to, I think we ought to look at renovation and maybe some more options, some renovation. I mean, there's parts of the North High School that are pretty old, and there's parts that aren't too bad. Or I don't know if there'd be capacity to have a whole high school at Jennings. Is that possible to have a whole high school?
And Jennings was built for approximately 750 students. We have a little over 800 at North. Moving some of the programs around, I think we would be able to make them fit.
I think that would be, I think we need to keep the North High School because it's a growing area. You got all these immigrants, they have a lot of kids. They're going to go to public schools, okay? And just to say, you got to go all the way to East Akron, the East High Schools. It's a long way. So.
But I think that's the part of the dynamic that has changed with kids these days. They don't have that. They don't have that mentality where we say, okay, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to work in life, this is the job. They have 10 jobs in a lifetime. Yeah. I don't think they plant the roots, and that's not a bad thing. I think they want a little more variety, a little more option to say, you know what, I'll go to this program because it's over here. I agree, transportation is an issue. How do we get them there? But north to east is maybe 2.5 miles. I can guarantee you north to Cuyahoga Falls is about 2.5 miles. Not that much different. You got to go up the hill and take a right. I don't think we don't, let's not get bogged down, and I don't mean this in a bad way, on the physical locality of where these things are. And that's, I think, sometimes when we make a decision, we sit there and say, okay, this is the mentality that we bring to it because this is the way that we did it. I think kids think differently, I really do. And it wouldn't be a bad idea is to ask them what they think.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, Mayor, but the difference between the transportation might be the same distance, but I believe you can catch one bus on North Main Street and go right by Cuyahoga Falls.
You can catch one bus and go right on Britain Road and get up to East High School.
Well, I don't know, you got to transfer downtown.
No, you don't. You can go up, you go to Talmadge Avenue. That's why he said he's working with Metro.
Do you have any other questions for the superintendent?
I just think we need to look seriously at keeping a North High School, maybe at Jennings, okay, if we got the room, and that's the bottom line.
All right, we have requests from people that have already spoken. Do we have any new? Mr. Walker, Mr. Miller, Mr. Alexander.
When we're looking at for instance, north, and we said a biomedical high school, we were also looking at investigating what we call a model that would deal with not only the biomedical, but it would incorporate a lot of other activities in that school that would draw students. Several of us have gone to Nashville and we've looked at that model. And that model incorporates, for instance, biomedical may be the key, but you also blend in other activities or other educational aspects that deal with the medical field. So you would incorporate maybe law. You would incorporate some other areas along with that academy model. So you would draw other students, not just for the biomedical, but other students for a variety of learning experiences. So it wouldn't just be excluding students who want to do some other things. They would still be able to come to that school and get the benefit of the academy and then choose a variety of other activities that they wanted to do. If we latch on to that academy model that we're looking at for that particular area, and if we keep that model. And again, historically, when we look at the picture, and Sister Walsh had mentioned, when we began the process, we were told 4 schools, 4 high schools would be sufficient for Akron. Akron decided, the community, and those who were on the board in the community, that we weren't going to have 4. We wanted neighborhood schools, which included high schools. So we began to work with those high schools until we finally we saw where there's some difficulties. We had to make some adjustments with our middle schools, high schools, and we came up with some innovations. Lindor-Mobian, when we look at combining schools, high school, middle schools, to reach a number of students. So we made some adjustments. We already had the model Firestone Litchfield, same sort of campus. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with some of the assessments as far as when we have taken from one school, one area from the other. But if that had been the case, we're not talking about that today. We're looking at how can we salvage. We only have $50 million. That's at the most. For approximately, if we could do everything that, if we had our wish list, there would be another $250 million to keep the other schools if we wanted to. We don't have it. The other is we're under a time crunch. We don't have a lot of time to make a decision that's going to affect all of our students. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time even for the $50 million. So that we won't have the ability to tap into those sources. We need to look at what's being presented to us, talk about it, discuss it, figure out how we're going to be able to share that. How do we get those students back? We've been trying in Akron Public Schools to market our buildings. There's only just so much we can do. We can't pay. We don't have the funds to market like charter schools, community schools. We pay millions of dollars to transport those students. That's our money that we could use for our own students that we can't use because the state tells us we've got to transport them. We spend millions of dollars doing other things where we can't market and compete on the same level as some of these other schools. And when you talk about our children going and open enrolling, you have to remember there's parochial schools. It's just not charter schools. We have a huge parochial school network in Akron that takes away from the public schools. Then we have those fringes. Coventry right now, they're discussing, are they going to, because of their financial situation, keep that enrollment and keep our students? Because they're living and dying on our students. Now, if they decide not to take our students and close shop, are we going to be available to make sure we can get those students? Now, if you're willing to go out in your community and go door to door and get 500 students, we'll be happy to receive every one of them and to provide the world-class education that we're providing right now for all of our students. So we've got to find ways to help each other to build up our enrollment. If we could build up our enrollment, yes, that would solve quite a few of our issues, but that won't solve all of them. We still have to decide, as Sister Mobian, where do we cut off in building new buildings? There's a limit to what we can do. So hopefully we can look at the information that's been given, continue to discuss it with joint board of review and other aspects with superintendent, mayor, staff, and come up with what we feel out of these options are going to be the most successful one for our children. What's going to work? It's not going to work for everybody, but we're going to have to make a choice, and we would hope the bottom line is, in a few of the choices, every one of our students would be in a new building so that they would have new facilities to work with.
Now, is anybody going to talk about the timeline, Mr. Bravo?
Yes. In just a second. Mr. Miller, and then we have Mr. Alexander. I'll write that down.
Thank you. I'm going to be a little bit all over the place because I was writing notes as I listen to everybody else here. But one thing I did want to say to Linda, as far as closing Helen Arnold, it'll be, I don't think we're closing any brand new building. Every building will remain a CLC and just be repurposed. So I want to put that out there for everybody here. We're not planning on closing anything that's been constructed. I look at this as an opportunity point in time to get this construction project finished, get the state done. We can move them out, and if we can collectively increase our enrollment through partnership, I would love to have that problem. I think everybody sitting at this table would love to have that problem. We are, as a school board, addressing those things. Reverend Walker hit on the one about the Academies model that they're using in Nashville. Reverend Walker and I went with North High School down to Nashville earlier this year. We, as a school board, just recently signed a contract with Ford Next Generation Learning to look at, and I encourage everybody sitting here to get online and go look at the Nashville Metropolitan School District and what they're doing down there, and how the Academies model has changed their just their enrollment, their attendance, and their graduation rate. I look at my job as getting kids to graduate. You know, we're 70-some%. We can do better. We're trying to do better, and one of those ways is through the model at Nashville. Russ, I don't think we're conceding any of these kids. We've done something since I've been on the board. We brought Mark Williamson in. We actually have a professional that knows how to get out on social media and push positive stories. That's been part of our problem. A lot of things that have been in the paper in recent history have been always about the negatives that are going on in Akron Public Schools. There's so many positives that we're finally starting to push that out. And we can see statistically how the enrollment, the people leaving the Akron Public Schools is slowing. Hopefully we're at the bottom of that curve, and then we can start to get it to go up. And any buildings that we do have to close, I'd love to be able to bring them back online and repurpose them. We would just love to have that problem. I think everybody sitting here would. Timeline-wise, in my mind, if we want to get the $25 million that's left on the table from the state, we have to do it pretty soon, because the state's about ready to come in and do another projection on what our enrollment is, and we might be projected only with 600 kids, then we can't even build a whole high school anywhere. So, you know, as far as renovating, I guess that's an option. The Ohio School Facilities, or Ohio Construction Commission, whatever they're called now, Ohio School Facilities Commission as they used to be called. This is where, in my mind, I want to get the state out of our business, because they tell us what we have to do with that money. and they won't let us take that money to renovate. We have to build a new building and that's it. So we could leave the 25 million on the table, say no thank you, and take the other 25 million from the city and renovate what we have. But then I think we're putting a lot of Band-Aids on buildings that I don't think, in my mind, it doesn't make sense to do. Let's get a building, let's get a high school built, let's come to agreement on that, and then let's move forward trying to make the Akron Public Schools a better school, more attractive, so people aren't getting on the bus to Cuyahoga Falls or Coventry or Barberton or wherever they're going to. We as a school system, I think we have a damn good Board of Education right now. We're working our rear end off trying to turn the Akron Public Schools around and the negatives that we see more often than the positives out there. Let's see, one other thing, we have done some changes in school boundaries in recent years, but that was, and I think the 5 options that we're looking at are doing the same thing and trying to keep clusters so all the feeder schools go to the same high school. That was a reason in the past, for like Bookdale, we moved Portage Path because it used to be split between 2 clusters, and at the same time Helen Arnold was split between 2 clusters as well, so we pulled one out, put another one in, so all the kids in the building in grade school would move up through the middle schools and the high schools. I think we're done with that, so we're trying to keep clusters as much as possible because I think it's healthy for a community, for the kids all in the same grade school, go to the same middle school, and go to the same high school, and I believe what we're looking at here does that. So I guess I'll just leave with the 5 options, and we've looked at a lot of other options as well. But I guess what we're trying to do is get every student into build one more building, and then move the shells around in some way, shape, or form so every student's in a brand new building. I think the only exceptions would be Akron Early College, which is on the university campus, STEM High School, which is on the university campus, and then AAA, which is the old Reading building. I think those would be the only students that aren't in a new building. So if we could just get this thing right-sized and then hopefully have some trust in the community that we're doing the right thing as a school board to move the Akron Public Schools forward in a positive manner, I think it would go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ennis
Mr.
is
Miller.
renovating, right?
We have Mr. Alexander and then Ms. Mansfield.
There's been a lot said here today, and I'm not going to say a whole lot. Just going to talk about 20 more minutes, myself, and then everybody else. I'm just joking. I don't have a whole lot to say, but I do want to say a couple things. Looking at the past is the past. In the past, you didn't have a lot of options. You had to go with what was put there. In today's society, in today's schools, in the world period, we have more options. Kids have more options to do what they want to do. Parents have more options to do what they want to do. There are more types of programming. There's more up-to-date programming. There's so many things that are going on. Parents have so many choices that they can use for their kids. So there's been a lot that's gone on. There's been a lot of thought that's gone on into what is done in the past, and is to get us to where we're at today. There'll still be some more thought to get to where we want to go. But one of the things that I look at, which is to me is very important, is that we know where the past is and where we would come from. We know where we're at today. But what is the best way and what is the best things that we can do to get to where we want to be in the future? Okay, so that we're not stagnating, that we're not staying at this spot, that we can move forward to get what's done for the students. I mean, I'm on the Akron School Board not because of adults. I'm on the school board because of kids. I like kids, I love kids, and that's my passion. So that's the only reason I'm on the school board. But what are we going to do as a school board to make the school district a better school district so that we can make sure that kids want to come and parents want their kids to come to our school, but also what can we do as a city, okay? Because you got to have both together. And what we have done today brought these two organizations together to start more and more, hopefully more and more dialogue as to what we have done, what's going on now and where can we go, what can we do to make the city of Akron, Akron Public Schools the best. Because there are two things that we should all look at. If you have good schools, if you have a good city, you're going to have everybody who wants to come, which means there's going to be people to come, there's going to be businesses to come, which in turn everybody wins. But we got to make sure we do all this together. Okay? I don't have a master plan for it. If I did, I'd probably be a billionaire and I wouldn't be sitting here with everybody now. But I don't have that. But we all have to do this together, and I hope that we will continue to work together to make sure that we can make our future city and our future school district the best. I think we've already started. I know we can get there. I do believe that we're going to make things better. So in saying that, we know where we've been, but we also need to look at where we need to go, not where we want to go, but where we need to go, okay? Which is need, is different between need and the want, but where do we need to go for the city of Akron and our school system to get better? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Mansfield?
I'm going to be super brief. First, let me just say what immense respect I have for everyone who's sitting around this table. We all serve truly the same body, which is the city of Akron. And the thing is, a body doesn't work. You might be the circulatory system, somebody else is the nervous system. They don't work independently of each other. They have to work together. So I'm so glad that we've come together today to do this. The one thing that we always have in common is a love for this city and a service to it, and I appreciate all the service of everyone here to serve this body. Couple things I want to mention really quick about Nashville. You've heard that mentioned a few times. I can't stress it enough. I got to go as well a few years ago. Gosh, I have no voice, must be screaming from the Cavs game. One of the things, we mentioned transportation a little bit, one of the amazing things they do in Nashville is every student and every family in their school district is allowed a pass with their school ID. They travel on their metro system for free. And with that free travel, what their metro service believes is it creates those future bus riders. And it's an incredible partnership that they have. Those families can use those buses, those 24/7. They can use them all the time. What they found, I don't know about a lot of your kids. I used to ride the bus frequently. Malls were a thing when I was in schools, and we would get on a bus and we would go. My kids have never ridden a metro bus in the city of Akron. They wouldn't know how to ride a metro bus in the city of Akron, nor would a lot of your kids. So what that could possibly do is be a way to build a partnership. And that's what Nashville believed would happen, and that's what has happened there. They've built future ridership through their students. I wish that we could operate on it, if you build it, they will come attitude. I wish that I could say, if we build this wonderful school, that all of the students will come back. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take those partnerships of working together. I think that we can do that. I also agree with my colleagues that I believe we've stemmed that. We've stopped the outflow, and now we're starting to see the turn of the tide. You see that in every article that you read online about charter schools and some of the things that they've done. The voucher system is going to be its own source of difficulty. We have to get through this state project first. We can't let Akron be Akron until we finish this last bit. Let's not leave $25 million sitting on the table. Let's get out from under them. Then we can do what we need to do to make the rest of the project work. That's our very next step. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Ms. Mansfield. We have three requests, four now, from councilmen or board members that have already spoken. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken that would like to speak before Ms. Sims and then Mr. Hook?
I actually just want to say thank you that we're finally here and having this conversation. I was privileged to spend 3 years on the school board. I know we've worked and talked a lot about coming together. I wish that would have happened sooner, but I'm glad we're here. Even as we, some of the ideas that have been put forth today, I haven't seen before. I know there's some things that we So I'm really trying to digest that because I do have concerns about how people travel. I know the city, as a city, we're spending a lot of time and effort towards identifying our space. We're asking people to identify what they call themselves or where they live as part of that. And I think we have to have the same mindset as we think about how we're moving students around. So I want to continue to have this conversation. And one of the things I don't want to do ever, and because I think it's unfair, because we haven't really had this collective coming together to have this discussion, to be dismissive about what's happened in the past, because I think that is the roadmap. Now, for some of us, you skinned your knee and your knee is better, but there's some who still have pain from that knee. And as we try to think about where we're going from here and trying to convince people what we're talking about is a good idea, people are remembering they've had their knee skinned before. And so I want us to be mindful of that. I just really need time actually to take in some of the new stuff, and I hope it's not long. I understand we're on a time schedule, but this is very important, I think, to every person around this table. So I don't want us to rush through, but I understand we're on a deadline. So I guess at the end of the day, I just want to say I'm glad we're here. I'm glad there's clarification about, this council in terms of not wanting to build one school over another. That was not a conversation, so I'm glad there's clarity there. And I'm glad that hopefully we'll have a little more opportunity to continue conversations even long after this project is done. So again, thank you to both sides of leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Bravo, and thank you everyone for coming here today. It's nice to see a great turnout and everybody concerned and participating. The only thing I wanted to add into the mix is that looking at this, and we're all talking about, and we're rushing towards the state funding is going to be ending, and we got to make sure that we do get all that money that's coming with that, and that's correct. But that doesn't mean we have to stop planning or building or getting where we need to be, and we have to get where we need to be, and that's right now, that's the most important part, because we are getting down to the end of all of this program. And so we have to decide where we need to be, not where the money's going to run out. Because we're in another situation where we're fixing our sewers. We have to. There's no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. And we have to fix our schools. No ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. We've got to put the schools out there that we need, but we can't go blindly into it and just keep putting up buildings and only half filling them or 3/4 filling them. We got to do it correctly. I just want to say we've got to do more than what we have on the board right now, but it's going to cost us. Just like the sewer project is going to cost us. We don't have a choice. So what we'll do is we'll figure out what we have to do, and we'll figure out how we have to fund it. And then we go from there. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Anyone else that has not spoken yet? If not, in this order, we have Council Representatives Kamer, then Mosley Samples, Amobian, and then Otterman. Mr. Kamer?
Thank you, Mr. Bravo. I just got two requests. Were you going to entertain or consider the residents and tenants to speak briefly?
There is no public comment today.
Okay. And then lastly, I know Mr. Neal touched on this, and I think we're going to get a lot of information from Mr. Flesher and David James. I was wondering if the Joint Board of Review can consider supplying an open checkbook online in regards to all the spending with this program.
Okay, I know that we're looking at that as a district. We've been working on it, but we're doing some EMIS upgrades. We can talk about it at Finance Committee and
It should be live within a couple months.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Donna, you knew we did that in the beginning of the month, right? The city went live at the
The
beginning.
city, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But we're talking about just the.
Right, I didn't know whether you knew that.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Ms. Mosley Sanders.
Just two things. As I look back through the options really quick, one thing I did not notice on here, maybe I missed it, there's no option for a Kent-Garfield combined. And I thought the matching funds came from when you combine the middle school and high school, correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't see if there's ever an option to combine the two of those, seeing that they're in the same cluster. And then lastly, with North Hill, the school sits in Kilby's ward, but a lot of those residents sit in my ward, and they have they have a unique culture up there, and it's very diverse. And, you know, I sort of kind of get a little worried about those students that are just coming here from other countries, and now we're talking about sticking them on a bus with a bus pass. If we make sure that there's an educational piece there for those families, if that were to happen, to make sure that those kids aren't lost in the system because of it. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley Samples. Ms. Amobian.
Yes, I certainly would like to hear more about the timeline that we're dealing with at some point. And I'd like for us to talk about our next meeting so we can talk about that. And hopefully there could be engagement from the public. But I don't want us to miss the importance of, and I know we've talked about a world-class 21st century school system, which is what we all hope to have at the end of the day. But in doing this, you know, we certainly didn't have a crystal ball in 2003 when we started this project, and maybe we would have been smart to take the state's advice, who knows, to have 4 high schools in all, you know, 4 corners of the city. I don't know if that would have worked. But I want us to really think clearly that we want to make sure that when, at the end of the day, our schools are world-class, quality schools, and very integrated. I don't want us to segregate our district in any way, and I don't want the burden to have to fall on African American children like it fell before on trying to integrate the busing. So we want to make sure that we consider all those major factors in our decision making and as we move forward with these discussions, because those are very critical things that we have to remember. You know, I was reminded when Veronica used this knee scanning scenario, that you have to remember the things that were done in the past, and we don't want to redo that. We want to end up with a world-class 21st century school system with well-integrated classrooms and with children being able to exercise all of these wonderful options we have. And hopefully, as we build this state community college, that all these career ed programs we have, this could be the start, and maybe they can continue on at that school and get these jobs, because we know the jobs are in healthcare and, you know, environmental things and that kind of thing, and we need to push those kind of programs and make sure we get all our kids involved. So with that, I thank you for this first step. I hope we leave here today with a plan of when we're going to meet next, and if we can hear more about the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Amobian. Mr. Otterman and then Mr. Neal.
Thank you. Real quick, Mr. James, early on, there had been some discussion as far as possibly leaving the $25 million from the state on the table, just going with the city match and doing what, I don't know whose words they were, they weren't mine, but lipstick on a pig scenario. So is that hopefully that's completely off the table, right?
You know, when you look at the 3 high schools, North Garfield and Kenmore, and look at the condition of like the heating systems, $25 million isn't going to cut it. The Joy fans at Kenmore alone in the penthouse are completely, you know, they have to be renovated, and we have to find, you know, remanufacture secondhand parts for those. I mean, all 3 of those buildings need completely new, and that's just the HVAC. That's not to mention, you know, lighting systems, all the controls, the network, you know, all of those would have to be done, even if you try to keep some of the interiors as they are.
So the answer is we're going to move forward with accepting the statement.
That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otterman. Mr. Neal?
Thank you. Just a couple things. One, as we look to bring those who aren't in the system but live in our neighborhoods back in. I think the one asset that we have is remembering that these aren't just schools anymore. The thing that brings us together are these are community learning centers. And I've always said that the community has dropped the ball on its part on utilizing these centers to the most. We have organizations that are doing things, but as a city school system partnership, bringing the best of what we have through partnerships into the communities, I believe we fail. And there's a principal that used to be at Kimmel by the name of Mr. Jordan, who had what I thought was a dynamic program where students went to school Monday through Thursday, and then Friday the community could come in, and this was before we had CLCs, the community could come into that school and participate in all kind of learning. There were field trips, everything. I think sometimes, we get stuck in this systematic way of thinking. The greatest thing we have is our collective genius, but I think we sometimes, because of the challenges that it may bring us, we try to shortcut that. So collectively, I say we need to look at how to maximize our CLCs to bring people back. And that was a discussion that led to us even having these meetings in the beginning. We realized that we had to find out how to really maximize those. The other thing is, I was hoping that before we had the questions, one of the questions that was going to come to the table, and I've had a chance to talk to some of the members on the school board about this, is Central Howard. That was literally a paper transfer. That's a beautiful school that if you had to think of doing something, it's a lot closer to the north side of town than anything else. But I will say, because I work on the north side, my business is there, that community walks. That community walks. So we've got to be sensitive to them. We can't think like we think. We've got to put ourselves in their shoes. But Central Howard, in my opinion, because I still got questions on, anybody with a $13 million asset, you like to see it appreciate. We're not seeing those numbers. And again, it's not just the school system, it's the city of Akron. How is our asset growing? And if it's not, let's look at bringing that back into the table as an asset that we can use. And then the last thing is we look at, we're talking about building schools. One of the challenges I've had, and I'm really thankful for the energy that comes from the administration through our planning director, is we're talking about schools building, but what about the ones that we have shuttered? I've got a school ranking that sits there, and the longer it sits, the more of a problem it's going to become to the community. We have to have a plan for these schools that we close. They can't just, you can't put that burden on the neighborhoods and just leave them there. And we know the longer something sits, the more it deteriorates. Collectively, we have to come up with a plan of finding community partnerships to bring into these schools, to repurpose them. And we cannot let it just sit there. I'm thinking of Lane Field, what ended up happening, Lane Elementary School, what happened there. So, and then lastly, I hope someone in the paper put that there was an important component to this, which was supposed to be a citizens oversight committee. We can't change what we did in the past, but we need to engage the citizens in the rest of this process so that we can do what's right by everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard from the council or the board? Anyone else? All right, I'd like to close with just a few, since I have not had an opportunity yet, but I want to let everyone know that I'm really inspired by what I've heard today. From Mr. Kamer, we've heard about the historical significance of some of our buildings. We've heard about the cultural significance of some of our buildings from Ms. Amobian. We've heard about neighborhood integrity, but we've also heard that we have some tough decisions to make, and that we can no longer continue to kick the can down the road, as it were. We've heard concerns about transportation and redistricting and boundaries and moving kids from place to place. And we've also heard about an appreciation, having an appreciation for the past while we look forward to our future. So at the board, our goal has been that for this project is to get every student in a newer building. And to that goal, we know that we're closing in on the end of the state's portion of this project. And I think if at one point we had added up all of our remaining projects that were still on the table, and we were north of $160 million. But as you've heard here today, we have maybe $50 million if we move in at least an efficient manner to get that money. And we have one project left, and that'll be one high school that the state will fund 1,264 high school students. But even if you took the difference between those two numbers, the 50 and the 160, and someone magically said, I'll write you a check, we've also heard from Mr. Pendleton say that the school district can no longer, we cannot afford to operate those buildings. We can rebuild everyone if that's what everyone really wants to do, but we've heard that we can't afford to operate them if we do. Because as a school district, we are reliant on a lot of things when it comes to funding. And as you heard about the cyclical nature of school finance, we're sort of at that point now where it just so happens that next year begins our cycle. So we can no longer kick this can down the road. And you've also heard that we still have a significant amount of capacity above and beyond our current enrollment, where we could potentially fit 3 smaller districts into our buildings without building a new building beyond today. So we've also heard that we can't follow the if you build it, they will come model. So we can't build a $50 million building and hope that it fills up and then come back to you later and say, we're sorry, that didn't work out and we're going to need some more money so we can build yet another building. So we have some difficult decisions, and I think we can all walk away from this meeting. We're taking away a lot to consider. As we move forward, I hope that we'll continue to move forward together like we did here today, as partners first who care very deeply, not only about the city, but about the kids that go to Akron Public Schools. So I want to thank again the mayor for coming today, the superintendent and the treasurer for their presentation, council members, board members, and staff. And with that, I will ask for, at least on the school board side, a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
On the city side, is there a motion for adjournment on the city council?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Roll call.
We're done.
Excuse me, we still have roll call.
Raymond?
Just.
Freeman?
Aye.
Fusco?
Yes.
Hope?
Aye.
Kamer?
Aye.
Key?
Aye.
Kilby? Aye. Milkovich?
Yes.
Mosley Sample?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Mobian?
Aye.
Sim?
Yes.
Somerville?
Aye.
Swerve? Thank you.
We want to thank the community for coming, sharing with us today. Thank you so very much.